This was the corrupt case of Alec Baldwin.
Producing a film about an accidental shooting, A-list Hollywood star Alec Baldwin became the lead suspect in a real shooting. On October 21st, 2021, Alec
Isn't this the guy in the Hunt Project October?
a Colt 45 revolver that he thought was empty and fired it directly into a cinematographer's chest, killing her and also wounding the director. All of the legal trials regarding this case are now over, but justice has not been served. 3 years later, the single most important question of the entire case has still not been answered, and potentially covered up as part of a conspiracy. This case is messy, chaotic, and has everyone pointing fingers at each other to take the blame, but the sad truth is, it was easily preventable, and the production's countless mistakes led to the tragic demise of a
I don't think it's the Alec Baldwin fault, right?
innocent woman. In May of 2020, it was announced that actor Alec
He's a director or something.
Baldwin would produce and star in Rust, a western he created with writer and director Joel Souza. Rust is based in 1880s Kansas, where Harlan
Wait, so is Alec Baldwin the director?
Rust, played by Alec Baldwin, comes out of hiding to rescue his 13-year-old nephew after he is sentenced to hang for an accidental killing. The film, described as a passion project for Baldwin, would be produced on a $6 to $7 million budget, which is considered a low-budget film in Hollywood. In October of 2021, the New Mexico Film Office announced that Rust was in production in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The production involved approximately 150 crew members, half of them local, 22 principal.
They get in the real gun or something instead of the pack one.
And 230 background actors from New Mexico. Because the film would use weaponry, production required an armorer to ensure the safe and realistic handling of weapons on set. An armorer is a trained professional who is responsible for managing all firearms and weapons used during filming, ensuring they are handled safely and correctly. This role is crucial because, as they found out, even prop weapons or those loaded with blanks can pose significant risks if not properly managed. This role was given to Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who was responsible for overseeing and managing all weapons. Just like many other jobs given to people in Hollywood, Hannah had a connection. She was the stepdaughter of longtime industry armorer Thel Reed. Also note that Rust was only Hannah's second film serving as lead armorer. Despite being related to an experienced armorer in the industry, Hannah had a less than optimal start in Hollywood. On her first film, The Old Way, another gunslinging western film, the film's key grip Stu Brumbaugh reportedly complained about her handling of firearms.
I guess so.
After firing a gun near the cast and crew for a second time in 3 days without warning, Brumbaugh said that Nicolas Cage yelled at her, "Make an announcement, you just blew my effing eardrums out," before walking off set in a rage. Brumbaugh also reported that Gutierrez Reed walked onto set with live rounds of blanks and no public announcement to the cast and crew, breaking established safety protocols. She tucked pistols under her armpits and carried rifles in each hand that were ready to be used in a scene. Firearms were aimed at people. She turned around and the pistols that were tucked under her armpits were pointing back at people. She twice fired guns on the set without giving any warning to the cast and crew, as required. The first time she was demonstrating the gun volume to see if the loud sound would startle the horses when without warning the gun went off. Hannah Reed being tasked with ensuring the safety and realistic handling of weapons was a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Have you heard that the flavored air category is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking? It's a whole new movement. tryfum.com and use code patrickcc or scan the QR code on screen to try your free fume topper when you order your journey pack today. But the armorer wasn't the only point of concern on set. Filming began on October 6, 2021, and members of the film said that they were promised the production would pay for their hotel rooms in Santa Fe, which was about 17 miles or a 20-minute drive away from the Bonanza Creek Ranch, where they were filming. Instead, the crew's hotel was located in Albuquerque, which was likely much cheaper than Santa Fe, but it was a 50-mile drive from the ranch. This irritated crew members who had to drive an hour after a 12 to 13-hour workday on set. The night before the shooting incident happened, the head of the camera department, Lane Looper, emailed a resignation letter due to the delays in pay, housing, lax COVID policies, and poor safety. He wrote, "In my 10 years as a camera assistant, I've never worked on a show that cares so
during the COVID times,
little for the safety of its crew, specifically citing gun safety as an issue. During the filming of gunfights on this job, things are often played very fast and loose. So far, there have been 2 accidental weapons discharges and 1 accidental SFX explosives that have gone off." Because of his resignation, Lane was not on set the next day. He knew something bad could happen, but he never could have predicted this tragedy. It's also important to consider that Lane and a few others were a part of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, aka IATSE, who were planning a strike over working conditions and low pay. Some of the film crew were members of this union. Alec actually supported their strike.
And I want to say to the people in IATSE, do what you need to do. Do what you need to do. You don't like that contract? You think the contract could be better? You want to go on strike? Go on strike. Do it. Strike. Do what you gotta do. You gotta fight.
Helena Hutchins, the victim and member of the union, even posted on her Instagram supporting the potential strike, standing in #IA Solidarity with our IATSE crew here in New Mexico on Rust. On the morning of October 21st, 2021, which was the 12th day of filming, one of the producers ordered the union members to leave the set and threatened to call security to remove them if they didn't leave voluntarily. Helena decided to stay. Many assume the production was trying to cut corners, save money, and get rid of the union workers so they can bring in non-union workers who are cheaper and easier to take advantage of. After the union workers left, an anonymous insider told the Wrap that several crew members decided to pass the time and take several prop guns off set that day, including the firearm involved in the incident, to engage in plinking,
who handed the real gun.
a hobby in which people shoot at beer cans. It's important to consider that real bullets would have been used for plinking. You should also remember this alleged plinking incident because it seems to be a major piece of evidence, but it never gets brought back up again. It never made it to trial. As the crew prepared to film a gunfight scene inside of a church, Hannah Reed retrieved firearms and ammunition from a locked safe. 3 guns intended to be used in filming were placed on a cart. Among them was a plastic gun that could not shoot live ammunition, a modified weapon that could not fire any type of ammunition, and a reproduction 1873 solid frame Colt 45 revolver replica made by Pieta that is a real gun that can shoot real bullets. These weapons were left on the cart for 2 hours unattended, from around 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Then when it was time to film the scene around 1:30 p.m., Hannah went over to assistant director Dave Halls, opened the cylinder, spun it to show the 6 rounds in the chambers, and then passed it on to Dave. Dave Halls then brought the revolver into the church and gave it to Baldwin. Hannah did not go into the church. Even though Hannah, the armorer, already showed him the chamber, it was a part of safety protocol for Dave to open the revolver's loading gate and rotate the cylinder again, exposing the chambers for his personal inspection. But Dave Halls told an investigator that he had not checked all of the rounds in the gun he handed to Alec Baldwin, and he couldn't recall if Hannah Reed spun the drum for him. He said he remembered seeing only 3 rounds. There were 16 cast and crew members around preparing for this scene. B camera operator Reed Russell was situated on a camera dolly, looking at a camera monitor with cinematographer Helena Hutchins and director Joel Souza. The trio standing behind the monitor were 2 feet from the muzzle of the firearm, and none of them were wearing protective gear such as noise-canceling headphones or safety goggles. As the trio behind the monitor began repositioning the camera to remove a shadow, Baldwin started outlining his strategy for drawing the firearm to the crew. He said, "So I guess I'm going to take this out, pull it, and go bang." Baldwin pulled the gun from his holster and rehearsed the motion he was going to do in the scene. On his second rehearsal, he grabbed the weapon and pulled it from his holster, and the gun fired. But the projectile that came out was an actual live bullet, not a dummy round. When the gun fired, the projectile traveled towards the 3 behind the camera monitor. Helena Hutchins was hit in the chest, and the projectile traveled through her upper body before hitting Joel Souza in the shoulder. Cast members immediately tried to apply pressure to her wound to stop the bleeding. Within minutes, an emergency crew appeared to help out Helena. Script supervisor Mamie Mitchell called 911 at 1:46 p.m.
Fire EMS, what's the emergency? Bonanza Creek Ranch has had 2 people accidentally shot on a movie set by a prop gun. We need help immediately. Bonanza Creek Ranch, come on. Stay on the phone with me. We're going to get some help, okay? What is your name? Don't hang up, okay? Hold on just 1 second. It sounds like somebody else is calling for 2 ambulances. We better make it's good. Everybody should be. We need some help. Our director and our camerawoman has been shot.
Souza was treated by EMS and transported by ambulance to Christus St. Vincent Regional Medical Center in Santa Fe, where he was admitted and released the following morning. Hutchins was transported to the hospital via helicopter and pronounced dead by medical personnel at the University of New Mexico Hospital. May she rest in peace. Helena Hutchins was born in Ukraine and grew up on a remote Soviet military base. She worked on documentary films in Eastern Europe before studying film in Los Angeles and embarking on a promising movie-making career. Hutchins began working in production while studying cinematography, becoming one of the most respected cinematographers in the field. Her credits as cinematographer or director of photography included The Mad Hatter and Blindfire. In 2019, American Cinematographer named her one of the 10 up-and-coming directors of photography who are making their mark. The same year, Hutchins won the award for Best Cinematography at the English Riviera Film Festival for her work on the short film Treacle. Her friends and family described her as a kind soul and a loving mother who was deeply passionate about her work. She is survived by her husband Matt and their son Andros. The International Cinematographers Guild would hold a candlelight vigil for Hutchins. Additionally, the guild established a GoFundMe fundraiser for Hutchins' family. Meanwhile, the American Film Institute honored Hutchins by creating a scholarship program for women cinematographers in her name. On October 22nd, the next day, Baldwin tweeted, "There are no words to convey my shock and sadness regarding the tragic accident that took the life of Helena Hutchins, a wife, mother, and deeply admired colleague of ours. I'm fully cooperating with the police investigation to address how this tragedy occurred, and I am in touch with her husband, offering my support to him and his family. My heart is broken for her husband and their son, and all who knew and loved Helena." The incident resulted in an indefinite suspension of Rust production. On October 21st, 5 days after the shooting, the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office said it was investigating what type of projectile...
So are they allowed to make this movie
was discharged and how the event occurred.
after all the court stuff.
The incident was also under investigation by the state's first judicial district attorney, the New Mexico Occupational Health and Safety Bureau, and the FBI. With all of these large organizations doing their own independent investigations, surely we would get the whole truth, right? Following the issuance of search warrants, the Santa Fe County Department announced on October 27th that they recovered over 600 items of evidence, including 500 rounds of ammunition, which were a mix of blanks, dummy rounds, and suspected live rounds. They added that a projectile, which they believed to be a live round, was recovered from Joel Souza's shoulder. In a horrible attempt at doing damage control, Hannah Reed's lawyer, Jason Bowles, began publicly announcing that his client was being set up or sabotaged.
We have a time frame between 11 and 1, approximately that day, in which the
Set
firearms at times were unattended. So there was opportunity to tamper with this scene. And yes, we're looking at that possibility because, I'm sorry?
Was the gun ever left unattended on the day of the incident?
Savannah, it was left unattended from 11 to after 1 o'clock.
Hannah's lawyers say that she finished setting up the prop guns for the scenes around 11 a.m. Then they were left unattended for 2 hours until 1 p.m. when they began setting up the scene again.
As the armorer, was it her responsibility to maintain custody and control of the weapon?
She had 2 roles on that film set, and that's another thing we want to emphasize, that she was an armorer, but she was also a key props assistant. She was only being paid for an armorer part-time. Essentially, she was doing 2 roles.
Her lawyer is trying to paint the picture that she did her job as the armorer as best as she could, but she was overworked trying to juggle her second job that she was allegedly not paid for, assisting the props master.
Once it was time for that weapon to go onto the set, did Hannah inspect the gun, the chamber? Did she look at the cartridges and determine that they were dummy cartridges?
She did not.
The reason Hannah did not inspect the gun was because once she gave the weapon to Dave Halls, it was then his responsibility to check the weapon once again before giving it to
Yeah, what's wrong with the guy?
Alec Baldwin. If Hannah was in the church while they were filming that scene, then it would have been her responsibility to
They should double check anyways.
check the weapon again before she gave it to Alec Baldwin. As far as the Hollywood order of operations goes, Dave Halls essentially assumed responsibility since Hannah was not in the church. Alec Baldwin also did some press in the form of an exclusive interview with ABC News where he claims he did not pull the trigger.
So I take the gun and I start to cock the gun. I'm not going to pull the trigger. I said, do you see that? She goes, well, just cheat it down and tilt it down a little bit like that. And I cock the gun. I go, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull the trigger at them. Never.
Oh, so okay, there's a lot of loopholes.
That was the training that I had. You don't point a gun at me and pull the trigger.
David Halls also asserted that Baldwin did not pull the trigger. More specifically, Halls claimed Baldwin's finger was never within the trigger guard during the incident. 2 separate firearms expert investigations, one by the FBI, both determined the Pieta 45 long
Yes,
pull
look at the
single-action
camera.
Army revolver could not have been fired without a trigger pull from a quarter-cocked, half-cocked, or fully cocked hammer position. The revolver's internal components were also found to be intact and operational, ruling out mechanical failure as a potential cause for an accidental discharge. So basically what people got from that was that Baldwin lied. He did pull the trigger. And still to this day, he remains firm in his stance that he never pulled the trigger.
Okay.
Additionally, Baldwin claimed that he thought the gun was empty after hearing
No, so literally lying now.
David Halls yelled the term cold gun. In Hollywood, the term cold gun refers to a firearm that is being used on a film or television set, which is confirmed to be unloaded and free of any live ammunition or blanks. When an actor hears cold gun on set, it indicates that the weapon is safe to handle and will not fire anything, ensuring the safety of everyone involved in the production.
The gun was supposed to be empty. I was told I was handed an empty gun. Or if there were cosmetic rounds, nothing with a charge at all, a flash round, nothing.
3 months later, the State of New Mexico Environment
Yeah,
Department
who told that it should be looked
and
into?
Occupational Health and Safety Bureau finished their investigation into the dozen safety protocols that were entirely ignored by the production, and they did it almost definitely because they were trying to save money as this was a low-budget film. The employer, Rust Movie Productions LLC, demonstrated plain indifference to the hazards associated with firearms by routinely failing to practice their own safety protocols, failing to enforce adherence to safety protocols, and failing to ensure that the handling of deadly weapons was afforded the time and effort needed to keep the cast and crew safe. Additionally, the employer disregarded or otherwise did not follow up, ask questions, or try to understand what happened when employees notified management about the misfire incidents and not feeling safe on set. The safety coordinator was present on set and took no direct action to address safety concerns. Management was provided multiple opportunities to take corrective actions and chose not to do so. David Halls was the first of 3 who would face a trial. The investigation revealed that David Halls handed a large caliber revolver to Baldwin without consulting with on-set weapons specialists before or after the gun was loaded. Regulators pointed out that Halls had witnessed 2 other accidental discharges on set, but had taken no investigative, corrective, or disciplinary action. Halls agreed to plead guilty to negligent use of a deadly weapon. He was sentenced to 6 months of unsupervised probation, a $500 fine, and 24 hours of community service. On January 31st, 2023, Alec Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez Reed were officially charged with involuntary manslaughter for the fatal shooting, with Hannah Reed's trial strategically being pursued first. In addition to involuntary manslaughter, Hannah Reed was being charged with evidence tampering. Now, even though Hannah was being tried for both of these crimes at the exact same time, for the sake of clarity, we're going to discuss everything related to the manslaughter charge first. The night before the shooting, Hannah sent these text messages to an unnamed recipient. "I might go smoke in the jacuzzi soon, but maybe not. not. I'm so pooped. Headed down to get high out back. Time to eat now. How'd the blaze sesh go? I'm still smoking.
I'm so poop. What does that mean?
The judge only allowed the prosecution to introduce a limited number of text messages regarding drug use. The prosecution had argued that Gutierrez-Reed was smoking marijuana while in possession of ammunition that was being used on set. And really quickly jumping to after the shooting incident, Rebecca Smith, the craft services manager, alleged that Hannah invited her up to her hotel room, and when she was leaving, Hannah allegedly gave Rebecca a Ziploc baggie with a little green baggie inside of it that had a little white powder in it.
What color was the powder?
White.
And when you were a younger person, did you have an opportunity to use the drug cocaine?
Yes, ma'am. I'm a recovering addict.
Are you familiar with what cocaine looks like?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the way that cocaine is packaged?
Yes, ma'am.
Based on that experience, what did you believe to be in the bag?
I believed it to be cocaine.
During the trial, we got to see what happened moments after the shooting, such as Hannah giving police the box where the bullets came from.
Sorry. Sorry.
Just relax. Just relax.
I'm scared.
You're all right. Just relax.
So here's the box that I got them out of.
From there, she seems to be more concerned about her career than the victim.
I'm the armor, or at least I was. How old are you? 24. I'm like the only female armor in the game, and I just got my whole entire career. My dad's the best, one of the best armors in the entire world, and he trained me, and I'm failure.
We also got to hear some of what Hannah said when she was brought in for questioning after the shooting.
Self-center.
What I'm trying to get with is because you can handle the gun, you obviously are going to be able to use the gun, so that's why I'm concerned about the dummy and the blanks, because those are left out. And is there some way that somebody can alter them to make them still look like your dummy rounds?
Well, so that's the thing, is that like bullets, like real bullets, pretty much look the same as dummies. The only difference is the rattle. And so yeah.
No, they didn't say what's his excuse.
That's a choice, but also I don't know. I'm kind of wondering because I heard back in the day, dummies used to have like a primer cap. So I'm wondering if maybe it was one of those older ones or something like that.
Just her being unsure of the difference between a real bullet and a dummy bullet is extremely concerning, considering she is the one who's supposed to be the professional. Because expecting actors or other crew to know the difference between the two is absurd. Now it's important to know that blanks and dummies are not the same. The tips of blanks are often visibly different. Instead of a bullet, it will have a crimped tip or a plastic tip. But dummies, more often than not, have a tip that looks exactly like a real bullet. So if a cameraman is trying to film down the barrel of a gun, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a dummy or a real bullet. And even if you were the one holding the gun looking down the chamber from the back end of the bullet, assuming you were inexperienced, you wouldn't know the difference between the two either. Sometimes you can indicate a dummy by them having a divot on the primer. However, photos of the ammunition were revealed in the trial. You will notice they all look the same besides one in the middle on the right, which has a silver primer. This is a live round, and all the others are dummies. But the best way to tell the difference between a dummy and a real bullet is by shaking them.
And then the other thing is that when I shake the one with gunpowder in it, you don't really hear anything. Can you hear that? So those are two BBs that you put in to dummy rounds when you make them, so that you can hear that there's no gunpowder in there.
Now consider how quick it would be to double or even triple check the ammunition.
Clearing a gun like this is really not difficult at all. In fact, if I load this blank cartridge here, even just glancing at the gun, you can easily see the rim there in the cylinder. To properly clear it, you would open the loading gate, pull the hammer back to the half-cock position, and then rotate the cylinder and check to make sure each of the 6 chambers is empty.
And from there, taking out the bullets to shake them just to double check, triple check, it would maybe take 1 minute. During the trial, insightful evidence was revealed in text messages from Hannah's phone. I don't know. I talked to Sarah and she said she checked the box.
Yeah, there's some Alec Baldwin fall to them.
Some didn't rattle, said Hannah Reed.
We rushed into it.
Unfortunately, we don't know the context of this text message, but it does heavily insinuate that Hannah was aware that there could be a live round somewhere amongst all the ammunition. What there seemed to be no debate about in this trial was that to save money, producers on the low-budget indie western had Gutierrez-Reed working as both the armorer and as assistant to props master Sarah Zachary. Hannah did not have time to conduct her duties to the best of her diligence, and was required to focus on other tasks, like working in the props department. But that doesn't excuse her. It didn't take much evidence to realize that Hannah was inexperienced, disorganized, reckless, and potentially on drugs who did not fulfill her duties as armorer to ensure safety of everyone on set. And for that, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was found guilty of manslaughter.
We find the defendant Hannah Gutierrez guilty of involuntary manslaughter as charged in count 1. We find the defendant Hannah Gutierrez not guilty of tampering with evidence as charged in count 2.
Hannah was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. However, Hannah was found not guilty of evidence tampering, the second charge that she was facing. And that's because the most important question of the entire trial was not answered. How did live rounds get on a Hollywood set in the first place? The motion picture and television industry follows a very long, detailed set of safety bulletins created by the Labor Management Safety Committee. The very first rule is that, quote, live ammunition is never to be used on set nor brought onto any work location, including any studio lot,
planted that
or location. Hannah Reed remained firm in her defense the entire time that she has no idea how live ammunition got on that set. We do know that the dummy rounds were supplied by Seth Kenny, the owner of PDQ Arm and Prop, which is a business that supplies weapons and props to the entertainment industry. Seth provided the bullets to Sarah Zachary, the props manager. On October 16th, 5 days prior to the tragic shooting on the Rust set, Sarah Zachary had an accidental/negligent discharge of a weapon on set, firing a blank round at her foot. In a civil suit filed by Hannah, she allegedly confronted Sarah and indicated that they would need to report the incident to production. From there, a heated text exchange took place between Seth Kenny and Hannah, where where Seth claims that Sarah's misfire was an accident and that she needs to move on and remember that Sarah is her boss. This paints the picture that Hannah was actually trying to do the right thing and report this incident to production, but Sarah, who had a senior position over her, was potentially not okay with that, and Seth was also not okay with that. Seth is not even an employee of the production, so why would he be defending Sarah so much? Shortly before Rust went into production, Seth Kenny's company was hired to provide dummy rounds to a separate production nearby. This was the show 1883, written and directed by Taylor Sheridan. Sheridan also invited Thel Reed to coach the actors of the 1883 set on how to properly shoot weapons. For context, Thel Reed was not just an armorer, he would also train actors on how to actually shoot weapons before their roles. In a private range session outside of the television set, the 1883 actors were using live ammunition and dummy rounds.
How the functioning of the firearms, and we were mixed between blanks and live. We had live ammunition in one area and then take people off to the side and shoot blanks. And essentially the safe distance on most blanks is about 20 feet. So we would take them away from the firing line and test and train them there.
The 1883 actors were shooting a number of different weapons, but primarily they were using Colt 45s, the same exact weapon that Alec Baldwin had. The prosecution then asks who provided the ammunition to the cast of 1883.
Do you know where the live ammunition came from that was used in those coaching sessions?
I do.
Where did it come from?
The 45 long Colt came from Thale. He had a number of reloads that I asked him to bring because at that time it was very difficult to source live ammunition.
Additionally, not all of the ammo was used.
Was all of the 45 long Colt live ammunition that was used for the training camp on 1883, was it all used up?
No.
So can you tell us approximately how much was left over?
It was, if memory serves me correct, it was about 125 rounds, roughly.
And what happened to that ammunition after you finished training the actors on 1883?
Well, that's a little bit hazy. At one point, I do recall that certain things were offloaded from my Sprinter van because they just weren't needed, and that was one of those things. But at some point, it got moved back to Albuquerque, and I've never been able to pinpoint the date.
The live ammunition was moved back to Albuquerque?
Correct.
And specifically, where in Albuquerque was it being housed?
It was in a gray bin marked live ammunition, and it was actually in the bathroom.
Of where?
Of PDQ's location in Albuquerque.
Of your business?
Correct.
Okay.
If you're wondering why this man does not exactly know where the bullets went or how they ended up in the bathroom of his office, this is a look at the inside of the PDQ headquarters. It is an absolute pigsty inside of his office with random boxes and props everywhere, including ammunition randomly thrown in nooks and crannies. Do you think it's possible that a man whose headquarters looks like this could have accidentally put a few live rounds mixed in with some dummy rounds? Kenny told the court he provided a single box of 50 Colt 45 dummy rounds that had just come off the prop truck in Texas from the 1883 series and was handed over to Rust prop master Sarah Zachary on October 12, 2021. There was one round in the midst of all the others that Kenny provided that looked different, and it was the live round.
So that round that I've circled in red does not appear like the others, and I have a tough time thinking that I would provided that round.
Okay. And after you gave the box to Ms. Zachary and it was taken to the set of Rust, do you know what was done with it after that?
No. Why even mix up the real bullet in the first place?
Even if she left it in her car, I had no idea what she had done with it.
After the shooting, Sarah provided Seth Kenny, a man who was not a part of the film production staff at all, a code to the safe inside of the prop truck.
Prior to going, did you provide the code to the safe to Seth Kenny?
It's ball.
The prop truck search happens. Are you present for that search?
They were there before I got there. They had already started the process.
When you got there, was Seth Kenny there?
Yes.
In the month after the shooting happened, Kenny talked on the phone with investigators over 40 times.
Do you recall that on the course of time after that shooting incident, you called Detective Hancock over 40 times?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Do you think it might have been higher than that?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. And during that time, you're sharing information with her, she's sharing information with you, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did she share you materials from the investigation at times?
The first time that I think she showed me anything was when they were executing the search warrant on the prop truck. She was showing me, I think they were black and white, grainy photos. Okay. That was the first time I saw anything.
Then 1 month after the shooting and those dozens of phone calls, his pigsty headquarters was searched, and they found nothing.
And again, there was a month time frame or so, roughly, between the shooting incident and that search of your place.
Yeah, I believe it was over a month. Because it was after Thanksgiving, so yeah, over a month.
Did you have any inkling or thought that they were going to come search?
No, not at all.
Even though you had been in contact with the detective and other people before that?
Sure they did.
I knew they were investigating. I had no reason to believe that they would be executing a search warrant on my business.
Now, did you provide your DNA to Detective Hancock?
No, I did offer it, though.
You offered it?
Yes.
And they did not take you up on that?
That's correct.
Even though Seth Kenney said he still had rounds from the previous film that he did with Dell, there were no bullets found in his office that matched the ones on the set of Rust. It's also interesting that Sarah Zachary, who received the dummy rounds in the first place, and was also Seth Kenney's point of contact, and was the one who had Hannah working 2 jobs, and also had an argument with Hannah after firing off a dummy round at her foot, agreed to cooperate with the state to testify against Hannah, giving her full immunity of any crime no matter what she says. And as she testified, she admitted to tampering with and getting rid of evidence, a crime that Hannah was being tried for.
In reality, what she did is she threw away rounds from 2 revolvers, is that correct?
Correct.
And that was right?
And she's not guilty.
That was after the
What?
shooting, correct?
Yes.
Now, after the shooting, do you recall how many minutes went by, just roughly, before you threw away those rounds?
I don't recall.
In that time frame, you also had a conversation with Seth Kenney, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall anything from that phone call? Again, not telling us what Mr. Kenney said, but do you recall anything from that phone call?
Yes.
What do you recall?
Just him mortified.
How long did that phone call last?
As I said yesterday, possibly 30 seconds, a minute.
So then in that time frame, you then throw rounds away from the 2 revolvers that you had previously loaded, right?
I believe so, yes.
So those 2 revolvers, you threw the rounds away from?
Yes.
And you threw them in a trash can?
Correct.
You didn't tell anybody at the scene that you had thrown those away, right?
Yeah, actually tampering evidence.
I didn't tell anyone, but it was in a public place. If someone saw me, then yeah.
Well, you didn't want to let anybody know that, did you?
They weren't the rounds in question, so I didn't think it mattered, and I had honestly forgotten.
Well, you knew that somebody had been shot, at least one person had been shot, correct?
Correct.
You knew that 911 had been called, is that right?
I didn't hear anybody call 911, but I had assumed.
And you would have assumed that the police would have to respond to a shooting, correct?
Sure.
And so as part of that, wouldn't you think that the police would want to see everything on set?
Yes.
So when you throw away rounds that they may have wanted to see, don't you understand that to be an issue?
No, because again, it wasn't the rounds in question.
But that isn't your determination, right, to determine what's in question. That is the law enforcement's determination, correct?
Okay.
Would you agree with me on that?
Sure.
In addition to this admission, she communicated closely with Alec Baldwin after the incident.
So after the shooting, you and Mr. Baldwin, do you talk on the phone also?
Yes.
And you also text?
A couple times.
Yeah. Is this intentional shooting?
Do you recall making a statement on October 31st, 2021 that Alec called me and I'm trying to make sure I keep my facts straight?
Yes.
So let's break this down for a second. Seth Kenney provides the dummy rounds to Sarah Zachary in the first place. Sarah then throws away information that could be valuable to the investigation as soon as police arrive on set. Then police don't find the source of the ammunition. Then Sarah provides Seth with a code to the prop truck safe that police are going to search in a week. Then when the police get the warrant to search the prop truck, Seth is already there when they show up. They search it, and they don't find anything. Then 1 month later, Sarah communicates with investigators and gets full immunity, even though she literally admitted to committing a crime. Also in that period, Seth Kenney is communicating closely with investigators that are looking into this whole crime. Then they search Seth Kenney's PDQ headquarters. He's also there when they do that, and they don't find any live ammunition in his business. The prosecution failed to answer the #1 most important question that literally everybody wanted to know, and that is, how did a live round get on this Hollywood set? Yes, we know this tragedy could have been prevented if Hannah just did her job, and even if she failed, if David Halls just did his job, then this also would have been prevented. But just the live round being on the set broke rule #1 of the industry safety bulletins. And the reason why I focused so heavily on this mystery surrounding the live bullet is because that is exactly what collapsed Alec Baldwin's trial, allowing him to win. 4 months after Hannah was found guilty, Baldwin's trial began. He was being charged with involuntary manslaughter, the same thing that Hannah was found guilty for. The prosecution argued that the gun assigned to Baldwin when the shooting occurred worked perfectly fine, and that Baldwin failed to do a gun safety check with the inexperienced armor before pulling the trigger in a reckless disregard for Ms. Hutchins' safety.
Yeah, he can check too, right?
However, it's clear that they had a weak case, because any logical person at this point understands that Alec Baldwin cannot be found guilty for this crime. Everyone else before him failed at their safety duty obligations before that gun got in his hand. Alec was an actor focusing on acting, and that was his only job and responsibility.
They never solved the question of the lethal bullet. They destroyed the gun, and all they were left with is Alec Baldwin and the movie they intended to put on. But because they never solved the lethal bullet, they eliminated the prop gun. There will not be one witness, not one shred of evidence in this trial, that Alec knew or should have known the gun was loaded with live round. So they can't prove. They can't prove their high-profile homicide.
Baldwin's lawyer predicted the state's behavior to a T. However, he didn't realize how low they would actually stoop. You see, as the state was failing to prove that Alec Baldwin is somehow liable for this woman's death, a miracle
actually making a mistake right now.
happened. A good Samaritan turned ammunition over to the sheriff's department that matched the bullets that killed Helena Hutchins. The good Samaritan who magically found these matching bullets was a former Arizona police officer, Troy Teskey, who is a longtime friend of Hannah Reed's father, and also someone who had allegedly been on 20 phone calls with Seth Kenney after the shooting. And it turns out the prosecution was in possession of this evidence for months, but they never submitted it. The court was entirely confused and shocked, so prosecutor Carrie Morrissey called herself to the stand to explain what happened, which was extremely unusual.
Because these are photographs from Hannah Gutierrez's cell phone extraction, and they show spot-on match for the live rounds found on the set of Rust. this is clearly the reason that Mr. Bowles said, you and your ammunition better get out of here, because it would not have hurt the case, the state's case against Hannah Gutierrez. It would have been the best evidence I could have hoped for.
If you didn't know, you're not allowed to just find evidence or bring up evidence and use it in the middle of a trial. All the evidence against the defendant has to be submitted on an agreed date so that the defense has time to look it over and prepare to defend themselves.
And this is the best evidence.
And the judge don't agree to this
Yeah, you said that a couple times.
during the submission.
Any favorable evidence you understand as a prosecutor has to be turned over to the defense, correct?
I do.
Any evidence that could be used as a defense to potentially be favorable has to be turned over to the defense.
Absolutely.
So the third Hague
You have to be kidding me, right?
report that never got turned
So
over to
this doesn't work.
the defense. You understand that that's Brady evidence?
I did, yes.
Okay. And you also failed to turn that over in this case as well, correct?
And let me give you a full answer to your question.
And if you're wondering what this information has anything to do with Alec Baldwin's trial, you would be feeling the same things as everyone else in this courtroom. The prosecution was preaching to the court about evidence that does not implicate Alec Baldwin in any way, shape, or form. If anything, it implicates Seth Kenney the most, but he isn't the one on trial.
The truth of this matter is, you don't like Mr. Baldwin very much, do you?
You know, that is absolutely untrue. I actually really appreciate Mr. Baldwin's movies. I really appreciated the acting that he did on Saturday Night Live, and I really appreciate his politics.
You told one of the witnesses who disagreed with you during an interview that you thought Mr. Baldwin was a cocksucker.
I do not recall saying that. I know that that was something that Mr. Baldwin would say on the set of press. I don't recall saying that.
Do you deny that under oath?
Without having more information, I can tell you that I do
I'm
not
just at home right now.
recall ever saying that. And if I did say it, I invite you to point it out to me.
You called him an arrogant prick to another witness.
To who? To what witness?
I'm asking you, did you call him an arrogant prick during a witness interview?
I don't believe I did. I don't recall.
You deny that?
Without knowing what you're talking about?
What
all
is
I can tell
this?
you is that I can't respond if I don't know what you're talking about.
And you said also to witnesses that you would teach him a lesson.
I never said to witnesses that I would teach him a lesson. Absolutely not.
The judge condemned the prosecution for their sloppy and potentially corrupt investigation. Judge Sommer called out Morrissey directly, saying that she was, quote, aware of the new evidence and yet did not make an effort to disclose it to the defense. The state's willful withholding of this information was intentional and deliberate. If this conduct does not rise to the level of bad faith, it certainly comes so near to bad faith as to show signs of scorching, and Alec Baldwin's lawyer motioned to dismiss the case.
Dismissal with prejudice is warranted to ensure the integrity of the judicial system and the efficient administration of justice. Your motion to dismiss with prejudice is granted. Now, with respect to the jury, I don't imagine you all want to return on Monday. I will take care of the jury.
Thank you.
We are in recess.
Baldwin cannot be tried again on this charge. He is innocent. At the end of the day, if the armorer had done her job properly, this would not have happened. If David Halls, the assistant director, had done his job, this tragedy would not have happened. However, with the prosecution so fixated on having their legacy moment and putting an A-list actor in jail, they could have actually solved the most important question as to how a live round got on set. Now, you and I strongly believe
They're not focusing on the issue.
it was one person that we're not going to say. But without this key question being answered and that person or people being brought to justice, it's only a matter of time before this tragic accident could happen again.
Okay, stop landing that.